Kia kara kia tātou, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, ki mā taratara ki tai. E hi aki ana, te atakura, he tiu, he huka, he hohu, ti hei mauri ora. Morning everyone, and thank you for coming to the second Thursday in a row, Policy and Planning Committee, today for our decisions on Plan Change 78 for the city centre. We've got absence from Haukura member Ashby. We have lateness from Councillor Fully. I think she's messaged me aiming around 11:30.
Mr. Chair, I have to go on council business by 2:45 if we're not finished.
We will definitely be finished by then, but okay, thank you.
Thank you.
It is in everyone's hands. I don't know. It is dark. And Councillor, speaking of timing, if we could have some order and get back to the Councillor Walker early departure. Can I have a mover? Councillor Filipina. I'll second. All those in favour? Aye. There are no petitions. Oh, sorry. Electronic attendance. We've got Councillor Fully, Councillor Bartley, Councillor Leone, and I think that's all. Deputy Mayor and Mayor will move in second. All those in favour? Aye. Are there any declarations of interest? Are there any petitions? There's no public input. There's no local board input. There's no extraordinary items. Right, we will go to, is it Celia and John are going to kick off? Celia? Cool, and we've had lots of workshops on this. We should know where we're at. We'll go to the staff. There'll be plenty of questions, I'm sure, as this has been a quick turnaround from when we got the IHP decisions about 10 days ago.
Can I raise a point of order? Could I move this item now?
Yep, I'm happy for you to move, and I'll second. Okay.
It's so popular, everybody wants to know it.
Well, it's not really a point of order, Member Henare, and I did go to the staff, but no. And this is why we go to 2 p.m. Oh, cool. Celia, thank you.
Okay, Morena, Chair and Councillors, sitting with me today is John Dogood and Elizabeth Laird, who is the lead planner who had been managing this process for us through the IHP, and Diana Hartley from DLA Piper, who was our chief legal counsel for this process. Today we're seeking the Council's decisions on the IHP, or the Independent Hearing Panel's recommendations on the city centre provisions in proposed Plan Change 78, and seeking a direction to staff to undertake the necessary steps to make the provisions operative for the IHP recommendations that are accepted by the Council. So I've got a short presentation, and I know we've done a workshop with you, so you're probably familiar with some of this information. So is it this one? Which one do I press to get? Is it that one? So that's the extent of the city centre boundary. So what the recommendation is doing is it's enabling additional development capacity through the removal of the maximum floor area ratio, which we call the FAR. It's giving increased general building height, moving it from between 30 and 50 metres to 72.5 metres. It's giving increased height in some of the precincts. That includes the Karangahape Road precinct, the Learning precinct, the Key Park precinct, Viaduct Harbour precinct, and the Wynyard precinct. It also provides for qualifying matters to be applied where appropriate to recognise the unique characteristics of part of the city centre and to allow sunlight into key areas of public open space. This is just a diagram or a map to show you what was in the operative unitary plan. And you'll note that the general building height on this map are the areas coloured in blue, purple, essentially blue and purple. The recommendations provide for an increase in height in the general building height area, which is the green bit in the middle. And that, that's the special height area in the green bit, and that's giving unlimited height. In the yellow areas, it's where it's called the special height area. No, sorry, that's called the general building height area, and that is going to 72.5, and there's also a recommendation to add a bit if I can show with the pointer, well, it's the little bit around at the bottom there, near Queen Street and near the Mayoral Drive. So the decision process today is set out in Clause 101 of Schedule 1 of the RMA. The Council is required to make decisions on these recommendations. It must decide whether to accept or reject each recommendation, and Auckland Council's decisions must be notified by the 30th of May. That came through in the Minister's direction. Public notification of accepted recommendations will include the date when the provisions will be made operative. So today, the process is to either accept all or accept some of the recommendations, which will then be publicly notified, and those parts which are accepted will become operative. I just want to note that if there are no appeals on this process, the only way in which somebody can challenge the process is through judicial review. Sorry. So the other element of this process is that some recommendations can be rejected. If they are rejected, we have to provide a reason for the rejection and provide alternative recommendations. All rejections are then referred to the Minister for RM reform for a decision. The Minister will then consider the recommendations and the Council's alternative recommendation and make a decision. The IHP recommendations were received on the 8th of May, which was not that far away. They agreed with the Council's overall approach, and there was full support of the Council's economic evidence. They preferred the Council's planning and other expert evidence in most cases, and supported most of Council's proposed provisions. Our recommendation is to accept all of the recommendations from the IHP. Open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ferry.
Kia ora. So with the accepting of the recommendations from the IHP, if I don't think the recommendation goes far enough, so for example, the special height area should be larger, that would make the general smaller, Chair. Yeah, well, I do also think the general should be higher, but that's not the point. If I think that the special height area, for example, should be larger than the IHP recommendation, is that really a grounds for rejection?
Through the Chair, perhaps I'll respond to that. So what the Council, the committee would be required to do is provide the reasons why it's being rejected.
Yep.
And those reasons would have to link to a submission and a particular piece of evidence that the panel heard.
Yep.
And your resolutions would need to record those reasons. Diana may be able to add further if you need any more information, but it is that linking it very clearly to evidence that was before the panel.
Yep.
And providing very clear reasons as to why the committee is not accepting that recommendation or several recommendations.
Okay, so, I mean, I guess what I'm grappling with this is, I would like in some places for things to go further, but that's not necessarily a reason to reject the conclusion that they've come to. I would just like it to be more. So, yeah, thank you. That is a helpful answer for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm going to ask it a different way. If you wanted it to be higher, we could change it in the unitary plan next year, couldn't we?
Yes, through the Auckland Unitary Plan review, which will be happening in the next couple of years, yes.
Okay, thank you. There we go. But my question was, bearing in mind we now have to make up capacity everywhere, what is the capacity? I know you said you haven't done the modelling. Have you any idea what this modelling will give us with regards to working towards our 2 million?
So with the economic evidence, based the evidence showed that we are getting 4 times as much enabled capacity in the city centre as a result of our changes to the provisions. We haven't done the modelling of what the recommendations are giving us, but we know it will be more because they've enabled more height. They've made changes to some of the standards, the bulk standards, so we can get more capacity within the city centre.
I suppose what I'm saying here, it would be really handy to know, because this is our starter for 10, right? When we do the rest. When do you think we'll be able to get that modelling?
Maybe I'll get Megan to answer that, because this is part of the original plan change. So anything here is not connected to the reduction and increase in the next plan change. So the city centre was already done. So Megan, did you want to? No.
That's a key point. That's a key point. I missed that point.
Councillor Walker.
I've got a question just around that goes to the delineation, particularly up in the K Road precinct. And my question goes like this. My understanding was that the council evidence was to leave it as it is, in line with accepting Kirkpatrick's submission. And we're deviating from that now, particularly up at the top where you've got the petrol station, and yes, it's accepted that the petrol station's out because, you know, that's gone. But you've got this contiguous relationship that goes to the heritage provisions, and the heritage provisions, I understand, are a higher level of planning than what we're looking at around the precinct. So why is that? Why aren't we maintaining the integrity that we've had prior?
Perhaps I'll start. We do have Elizabeth here. Elizabeth can only really speak to the case that the council put forward at the hearings, but this is the western portion of Karangahape Road. There was a recent resource consent application declined in that area that some of you may be aware of. The current height limit in that western end of Karangahape Road, opposite the mobile service station, for those who are familiar with it, is 15 metres in the operative plan. Plan change 78 proposed to increase that to 35, and the hearings panel has recommended that 35 height limit applies. So that's the height limit. In addition to that, the Karangahape Road area as a whole is within the Karangahape Road precinct in the unitary plan, and the precinct in the operative plan, the current plan, extends right to the western end of Karangahape Road. The hearings panel has recommended that final portion around about where the mobile service station is and where the resource consent application was declined is removed from the Karangahape Road precinct, and the precinct stops just before that last block of Karangahape Road. You are correct, Councillor Walker. Our case at the hearings was to leave the precinct as it is, but on reflection, looking at the recommendations from the panel as a whole, looking at the the fact that this would then go off to central government, the Minister for the Environment or Resource Management Reform, looking at the values present in that end of Quay Road, our view is that it is one that we should reject. The committee is able to, to accept that recommendation from
You
the
say
panel.
reject?
Accept that recommendation from the panel.
I'm
So-
certain you said reject.
The committee is able to reject it. There is evidence that you could rely on. You would have to provide the reasons by way of resolutions today. Clear resolutions, clear reasons why you would be rejecting it. Our advice is overall it's not something that we should, well, we're not recommending that you reject that recommendation.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, what are we looking at in density versus retaining the integrity of the heritage in the area? Because that area also melds into heritage housing that's in the vicinity. So it's fairly contiguous. So, I mean, is this a significant issue as far as density is concerned?
With the increase in height limit under Plan Change 78 and supported by the Independent Hearings Panel, that achieves the density. The removal of the precinct from that block results in less emphasis being placed on a new building fitting in with the heritage character of the remainder of Karangahape Road. So the density is largely achieved as a result of Plan Change 78 increase in height from 15 to 35 in that block. It comes down to a design issue around the degree to which new buildings on that block should be reflecting the heritage character of the precinct as a whole. Under this recommendation, there would be less ability within the unitary plan to consider that. It doesn't vanish completely as a matter, but it is something that will be given less consideration in that block. And the panel has recommended that based on that block and the block opposite with the mobile service station really having no heritage values present immediately on the street front in that block.
Okay, I may come back to you on this, Mr. Chair, to think this through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I find this about as complicated to follow as a wiring diagram on a Tesla. I need to understand yesterday's conversation, which we talked about view shafts, and I took a lot of note of those because they traverse all over the city. This is not connected to that. Even yesterday's workshop, this is not connected to that. Where's the connection there? That
Through the chair, we do have to be a bit careful in that the workshop yesterday was a confidential workshop, so there is only so much we can really discuss in the open forum here. We can say that the workshop yesterday was around a potential replacement for Plan Change 78 outside of the city centre, not in the city centre. Under that plan change, things like the view shafts are a matter that could be considered again, but today we're considering the recommendations for the view shafts and other aspects that cut across the city centre. There's a recommendation to retain the view shafts in the city centre. It may be through a future plan change that there could be some form of review, but at this point in time, we really need to focus on the city centre and the provisions there.
Okay, so my question still stands. I just want to make sure that what I'm saying yes to today doesn't come back and bite me in the arse at some stage later where you say, well, hang on, you said yes here and you... I
guess the context, Councillor Turner, through the workshops, and it is a bit hard. We've got the Plan Change 78 as a whole that's currently going through a hearing to try and change what we are doing with the wider plan change. One of the caveats the government gave us was that we wanted to, because we were halfway through it, to approve the city centre as a whole first, so under the current plan change. So when we go out for the next one, the city centre will be complete. We don't even have to, we can't talk about it again. The rest of the city is looked after, and then that goes to hearings. What the city centre portion that we're having today has already been through a hearings process, and we have two choices: to accept the recommendations or reject the recommendations. And what the staff are saying is largely the recommendations are in line with what we thought they were going to be. But it doesn't really connect to yesterday's conversation in a huge way.
So that's a no, it doesn't connect to any other conversations.
Just for clarity, because it was confidential for those who are listening, we are having some preparation workshops if we get the government change to allow us to do a new plan change, to get councillors up to date with what we may or may not have to do through that plan change process. The workshop yesterday was on a number of qualifying matters, and we did talk about view shafts. That is just giving councillors an idea, Councillor Turner, of what kind of policies could go forward and what evidence we'll need for that next plan change. This today is just on the city centre, which we won't be able to do in the next plan change anyway.
Okay, just one last question then. The qualifying matters are very small in number, and we have you know, all we have is qualifying matters that we can use to. The way I understood it when you explained it all to us was this NPSUD, the qualifying matters are the only controls council has over that, correct?
Not entirely correct. Qualifying matters are factors that the council can apply to have lower height limits and lower levels of density and intensity than the NPSUD would otherwise require. So the NPSUD says, for example, around the rapid transit stations within the walkable catchment, we must enable buildings of at least 6 stories. Now, the NPSUD also says if there is good reason not to allow 6 stories in certain locations, that has to be a qualifying matter, and NPSUD talks quite clearly about what qualifying matters are. So it is a way of the NPSUD acknowledging that in some cases, the starting point of, say, 6 stories or in the city centre, unlimited height, can be modified and reduced if there is a qualifying matter. And typically those are things that are matters of national significance under the Resource Management Act, outstanding landscapes, historic heritage, significant ecological areas and so on. Those are the sorts of things that the NPSUD clearly identifies as qualifying matters. It also allows the council to identify other matters that aren't necessarily of national significance as a good reason, but it has to be very carefully justified. So that's what a qualifying matter is.
I understand what a qualifying matter is. I'm trying to work out where they fit across the spectrum of all the things we've been asked to decide, and I was trying to do my homework last night and ended up with more questions than I started with. So we say yes to this, and qualifying matters could still affect it, that we're not locking in the qualifying matters into this point as well, are we?
As Chair has mentioned, only for the city centre. You're not locking in qualifying matters for the rest of the region. And if there was a plan change for the rest of the region, then you can look again at what qualifying matters should apply under that plan change. So you're not locking anything in other than for the city centre.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Darby.
Thanks. Just in summary, I've got a few questions here, but there are 37 recommendations, and the team have assessed all and are recommending all 37 in their totality to us for voting aye to.
That's correct,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. Hey, look, we always miss a few things in workshops, and I'm just interested in looking at those recommendations in more detail. Can you just briefly, there's just been some changes on the building setbacks in the city centre, setbacks, outlook space, and tower dimensions. Can you just, I don't need a big, thorough urban design answer, but just give me a sense of the setback changes, the 6 metre and the 12 metre separation, the outlook space and the tower dimension. And also, I was encouraged to see new matters of discretion for through-site links, which is something that's really challenged us. If you could just briefly summarise that particular part as well.
Through the chair, I'll respond to this. So, in terms of, I'll just quickly run through a summary of the changes to built form standards between council's position and the recommendation. So, in our evidence, we recommended a maximum tower dimension standard of 50 metres. This already applies in the special height area. We recommended to retain that and to extend it to areas in the city centre zone where additional height was proposed. The IHP preferred submitters evidence which requested a maximum tower dimension of an average of 55 metres to enable larger floor plates. With regards to setbacks, an operative 6 metre setback already applies in the special height area. We recommended to extend that to areas where additional height was proposed and to introduce a variable 6% setback in the special height area to manage the effects of taller buildings. The IHP supported the 6 metre setback and its increased spatial extent, but did not support the variable setback, so they just want a standard 6 metres. With outlook space, the operative outlook space applies to residential developments, and the outlook space increases as the building gets higher. The IHP has recommended to reduce it to a standard 6 metre outlook in line with the minimum setback required. So those have been run past our experts and can be supported.
Got that, thank you. And the through site links? What's the new matter that's been introduced there?
So through site links under the operative plan are managed through the bonus provisions. So we recommended to delete the floor area ratio standards, which includes deleting the bonuses associated with that. So in our evidence, we had initially recommended through site links be managed as a standard through submitted evidence and then through the hearing and our evidence there, we came to the position of adding that as a matters of discretion and assessment criteria because it fits more appropriately with how those matters would be assessed in a development. So it's changed from being a requirement under a specific bonus to if someone does provide a through site link, then here are the assessment criteria and matters of discretion that they would be assessed under.
Okay, sorry, I'm not quite getting that. I know before it was about give us this, we'll give you that, effectively. And now it is been introduced as a new matter of discretion. So we've got a wider power to engage with the discussion or require a through site link. I just want to get a sense of, are we in a better position to actually require a through site link when we can identify the need for it?
No, there's no requirement. So this is matters to be considered if a development proposes a through site link, but there's no requirement anymore to provide them.
Leave that there. Just on view shafts at recommendation 16, Chair, I know we had a confidential discussion on that yesterday. I don't want to go there, but we've to date we've referred to these as volcanic view shafts. It's all over our plan as volcanic view shafts, and the recommendation is to change the language to maunga, and we now refer to it as maunga, which I totally accept. And there's a requirement there for special information requirements to be written up for D something or other, D, can't remember what it is, some particular section. So these recommendations, and accepting these recommendations today, and I'm assuming that there's going to be support for it, all of them, we actually do change the name throughout the plan, not just the city centre, to maunga view shafts, correct? Even though this is just the city centre section. And there is the staff will very quickly be developing these special information requirements.
Through the chair, Yes, the recommendation is to change the name of the overlay, and so it makes sense for that to be a change through the plan.
And right across the plan? Not just the city centre, but right across the plan?
Yes, but it doesn't have a substantive change in terms of rules. It's an identification.
Yeah, totally get that. And I note that there have been, the view shafts as they apply in the city centre have been retained, and there's been good evidence to support that. And there's just one tweak, and that's on some cranes and one particular view shaft. I think that's about it. And then there's a discussion about maunga to maunga, a view shaft as well. Can you just summarise the discussion there that the panel had on the importance of that maunga to maunga view shaft? Was that that was an existing view shaft, or are they talking about a new relationship? Maunga Fo, I think, to, what was it? I just can't remember. I'll have to look.
Through the chair, at the moment, there's views to specific maunga through the view shaft provisions. The unitary plan RPS also refers to the importance of views between the maunga. What the panel has said is that it recommends that the council investigate those new view shafts, but it's not, doesn't have the powers to recommend new view shafts in the context of views between them. In this context, although there is a special information requirement where there's an application for a resource consent to infringe the Auckland War Memorial view shaft, that's already at a certain height, and where there's potential for infringement of the views between Takarunga, Mount Victoria and Mangawhau, there is a suggestion that that be addressed in a resource consent application, but there's no new view shafts per se.
When you say it's a suggestion, can you just, did you say suggestion? It's not a recommendation. Sorry. It's not a recommendation, it's a suggestion, did you say?
It's a matter of discretion.
Matter of discretion, sorry, I misheard you. Okay, got that. And the only other points, Chair, just at recommendations 35 and 36, there's the panel have referred to like brand names to identify locations, you know, swashbucklers and the name of a building, and not addresses. I'm assuming that when we pick this up, we refer to them by addresses or titles, because that, I found that really hard to read and try and go to that site and get a sense of, oh, it's that location. There's reference to the Orams building, there's reference to the Eke Panuku Western something or other, there's reference to the Auckland Harbour Board building. They are not the, in my eyes, they're not the appropriate ways to identify a property. I'm just saying, I'm assuming that you will be identifying them as either addresses or titles.
Through the chair, yes, they will be identified through, in most cases, through the precinct plan maps. So that will be indicated on the maps in terms of specific heights, as is done in the operative plan.
Thank you. Mayor Brown.
Thank you. Definitely in support of the general thrust of this. Thank you. And but I can't quite get my head around why the K Road is not, it's 72 metres. I mean, I just lived in a house, in a building which is 60 metres in an area which is now going to be 72. And so that it's almost a step back. I mean, with the whole point of this, if I understand, is to get more jobs and residents near these expensive railway thing we built, City Rail Link. And so you know, it doesn't go far enough, because the other part of it I'm asking is, if we opt out of MDRS and potentially lose 30% of our capacity, how much does this add back in? I know that it's not able to get it exactly right, because even in the MDRS, some of that new build would have been offices, not just houses. So there's a couple of questions. How do we get the K Road back up to where it's already breaches that?
So we're talking through the chair to the mayor.
There and amongst the yellow.
Yeah, so this is the recommendations from the panel, and it's the western block of Care Road that I mentioned before, Karangahape Road. So the green notation is where the height is proposed to increase from 15 metres to 35, which is roughly 8 stories.
But there's already
also.
a 20-storey one right bang in the middle of that.
And then the yellow areas behind that western portion of Karangahape Road, heading down to the motorway and in the direction of Ponsonby Road, are 72.5 metres, roughly 18 stories. So it is just the frontage properties, it's not the entire block. Yep. So there is some increase to 72.5. The panel didn't hear compelling evidence in its view on the need to go beyond 35 on that frontage. I think that's about as much as we can say. So again, the committee, the council can at this point reject that and have an alternative of a high height in that green portion. We'd need to have clear reasons today in the resolutions and pointing at the specific evidence that that's relying on. And
I don't really want to reject anything of this, because if we reject any of it, the whole thing gets jammed up for a while, doesn't it? If we accept it, it becomes law tomorrow or something. Is that right? Have I got that wrong?
Very shortly, not tomorrow, but within the next week, I think.
We have to try our best to get it done
6th
by
of
the
June.
30th.
So almost immediately, and it is a great improvement in the capacity. Have we got any particular ideas about how they go? And I mean, within those yellow and dark green areas, it's not all residential, it'll be mixed there, isn't it?
That's correct. And in terms of assessing the capacity, it's difficult when there's so much flexibility in the city centre to go office or residential. So there's some big assumptions you have to make. So the best figures that we have available are from the council's evidence at the hearings, which was, as Celia mentioned, there's roughly just under 4 million square metres of floor space in the city centre right now, roughly 4 million. The built, if you added all the floor space in the city centre right now, it's roughly 4 million. Under Plan Change 78 is notified, including the view shafts, it's roughly 16 million in plan enabled capacity, 16 million. So that's a fourfold increase in what we see in the city centre right now as to what could be built under the notified version of the plan change. Now, what the panel has recommended would enable even more than that. We just haven't had the time to model what additional capacity would be available with the panel recommendations. It's not a massive increase from the panel, but the notified version of 78 had that 16 million in the evidence of Council's economist, Doug Fairgray.
Okay, well, that's all in the right direction, so I definitely support this, particularly noting that I'm the only person who lives in that area. So I think this is good. Okay?
And I guess just to the point, Mayor, just to your last point, Mayor, on the, oh, don't worry, Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The Mayor actually stole my question on K Road. Yeah, it is a bit of a weird one. We're building a mass transit station with the CRL, and many parts of that walkable area where you could see the station, there's still some of the most restrictive controls in housing in the city. So, I'm wondering if, did the panel have anything to say about that? Was there any reasoning for that?
Well, the panel was supportive of the increase from the 15 metres in that western block up to 35. For the remainder of Karangahape Road to the core part of Karangahape Road, the panel was supportive of keeping the heights lower to avoid a mismatch between the volcanic view shafts that cut over parts of Karangahape Road and also the heritage character of the older buildings there, and felt that anything beyond the frontage being 35 and into the rear being 72 would compromise the heritage values of the core part of Karangahape Road.
Yeah, look, the special height area in particular is a really great improvement. Look, I'm just not quite sure why the recommendation was only for a small expansion of that special height area. Why not go further? And it kind of leads to my previous question, and actually capture areas that could be easily walked to with CRL stations, and not just the one on K Road to Waihoro to you as well. So was there a reason why that's small?
So to the north of the area, it's waterfront and all the sensitivities around higher buildings in the waterfront area. To the west of the green area, you have the view shafts to the maunga. So to allow beyond 72.5 is sending mixed messages in the plan. On the one hand, we're saying the maunga, which go over that western yellow portion, are very important to the city, but on the other hand, we're suggesting the heights should be higher. So that's to the west of the core green area, which has the unlimited height. To the south, you are coming towards Karangahape Road, Myers Park, and some of the sensitivities there. So generally, the team felt, and the panel has agreed, that going up to 72.5 from where we are now, which is 50 metres or less, is a significant step forward in terms of enabling more capacity. It aligns the yellow area around the core of the city centre with the 10 metropolitan centres, which also have that 72.5 metre height limit. But yeah, there is the sensitivity around Karangahape Road as you get closer to that area. To the east, concerns about potential impacts on the strong cluster of heritage buildings around O'Connell Street, High Street and so on. And so again, pushing things up to 72.5 was considered to be an appropriate increase without compromising that. And then I guess also to the east and southeast, you're moving into the learning quarter, the Albert Park, and potential impacts on those. I guess through the process, there was an opportunity for submitters to come in with strong evidence in support of further increases beyond the 72.5 and expanding that dark green area with the unlimited height. But the panel was not convinced that there was a compelling case or compelling evidence as to the need for that. And in terms, again, of overall capacity, the panel was not convinced that the restrictions were impeding overall development opportunities in the city centre at all. When you look at demand over the next 30 years and beyond relative to that significant increase in capacity, the conclusion supported the council's economic evidence that there would be minimal or no difference in what would actually be built in the city centre.
Thank you. Just got two more, Chair, thanks. Yeah, I think the central tension there, and I think you've alluded to in your answer, is whether, this is undoubtedly a step forward, I'm not arguing that, right? But whether this is our one shot to actually nail it, or whether we're comfortable with steady progression forwards. So I suppose on that note, I am a little bit confused, and I wonder if there's any kind of evidentiary or legal basis for it. Why was 72.5 the number chosen? I mean, what's the harm in 80 or 90 or 100? Why that specific number?
So, through the chair, so the 72.5 metres is the operative metropolitan height. Sorry.
If you just move the mic closer to you. Thanks so much, Elizabeth.
The 72.5 metres is the metropolitan height. So we did have existing, evidence that it was a height that we understood sort of the effects of in terms of the height of those buildings. and there was no evidence provided by submitters around a specific height greater than that. So there was evidence around submissions and evidence around unlimited, but no evidence, no one else came in with any other height proposed. So we had to go with the height that we had some basis for, and that was the 72.5.
It's kind of a carry forward from the previous work, eh? Is that fair?
It was based on the information available and the evidence available from our urban design experts.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do find it a bit strange that in a city centre environment we would stop someone building 80 or 90, but look, I'll save that for comment. I've just got one last question. Just at a broad level, we're required through this to, quote, enable building heights and density of urban form to realise as much development capacity as possible to maximise the benefits of intensification. That's what we're required in our policy. Does this recommendation meet that to the best of our ability?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to pull a statement from Council's economic evidence that really hones in on this issue of capacity, demand and so on, and was supported by the panel as the preferred evidence that the panel heard on the whole issue of capacity, demand, city centre. So I've got this evidence. This is from our expert, Dr. Doug Fairgray, who looks at capacity demand from an economic perspective. So his conclusion was the benefits of economic growth and development would not be less under Plan Change 78 with these sorts of restrictions and others than an unlimited approach with no constraint on height in the city centre at all. So effectively what he's saying is with these sort of constraints and the view shafts and other restrictions to allow sunlight into open space, the development would not be, economic growth and development would not be less under PC 78 than unlimited approach to Policy 3A, which you read out. Another quote, would not have a material opportunity cost by having these restrictions. So that's some of the key conclusions there. But I think the upshot is that the panel quite clearly states in its recommendations that it prefers this economic evidence to other evidence that it heard.
I find that a little strange, but I might come back to that and comment. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Just while we're on that, and I guess this is part of the 4D chess of this process, because I had similar concerns to Councillor Henderson, but largely this is because of the heights we put in 2022 as starting points around that. Like, for Councillor Henderson, that would have been our opportunity then to ask for 100 metres, etc., around not the special height, the general height.
Yeah, that's largely the shift. It's paragraph 86 of the panel's recommendations that really captures this as well. If I can just very quickly read that evidence too, because this is a really important matter. So the panel prefers Dr. Fairgray's economic evidence that the overall quantum of development in the city centre provided by Plan Change 78 as notified, accommodating the various qualifying matters, would be the same as an unlimited Policy 3 approach, even though the pattern of development in the city centre might be different if we had no control over development whatsoever, and that the identification of qualifying matters results in a net benefit as opposed to an economic cost. So I think that's quite compelling, and that's from the panel's recommendations that you have before you.
But I guess I did have some confusion on that. What does that actually mean? How could that be possible?
It means that even with these restrictions in place, the amount of overall development over the next 20, 30 years in the city centre would be the same as if we had no restrictions in place. That's my simple sort of summary of it. That even with these restrictions in place, there is so much potential for development in the city centre under this plan change that in the short, medium, long term, the amount of development that we'll see in the city centre is not going to be constrained. It may happen in different places than if it was unlimited. It may be that if we had no 72.5 metre restriction in the yellow areas, we might see some taller towers in that area. So it may push the intensity to the green area and other areas, but overall, the city centre as a whole, the amount of development with no restrictions, as supported by the panel, will be the same as with the restrictions that the panel has put forward. And that's because of the headroom, the amount of capacity that this plan change is providing relative to estimated demands over the short, medium and long term.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Just coming back to that question I raised earlier around retaining some of the significant historic buildings, and these are in that location that's, you know, in the vicinity of Newton Road. And my question goes like this: I mean, is it not possible to retain those buildings that are part of a larger block and still have the height? I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, are they?
So, Councillor Walker, just to clarify, we're referring to that western portion of Karangahape Road again?
Yes, yes. So I'm referring to the evidence by Ms. Walker, no relation as far as I know. And I mean, we're talking about the two significant historic buildings that face Newton Road. These have an important relationship with K Road and form the gateway entrance to the precinct as you approach from Newton Road. The block form part of the ridgetop location, orientation and aspect of the K Road precinct. While the building at 538 K Road has been demolished and that site is currently vacant, and the service station located opposite 555 does not contribute to the precinct's built form or streetscape building, the buildings on 582 K Road do contribute to the character of K Road. So that's the location that I'm focused on. And my question is, can we still retain them but also have the height? I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, are they?
No, they're not mutually exclusive. The panel has recommended that the historic heritage overlay still applies to that block. So they have recommended that the Karangahape precinct stops short of that block, of the sites that you refer to, but that the historic heritage area would still continue right to the end of it. So, as I mentioned before, there is still an ability to take into account the relationship between new buildings in that block and the heritage values of Karangahape Road. The panel has simply recommended that the precinct is pulled back to recognise the difference in the qualities of that block relative to the remainder of the precinct. So there is still some ability to assess impacts on historic heritage for new buildings in that area.
Just to clarify, what's the difference with the retention of the precinct in the area as it goes to height?
The precinct doesn't govern the height. It's this height plan here that governs the height. So the removal of the precinct has no bearing on the height. This map here, as recommended by the panel, would go into the unitary plan, and it sets out the increase in height for that western block from 15 metres up to the light green 35 metres.
Okay, so just to clarify then, if we can retain the heritage and we could retain the precinct and it doesn't have an impact on the height, and I'm working off the evidence that I've got, why wouldn't we do that?
Well, on balance, we feel that it's not adding a huge amount of value. It would then have to go to the Minister to make a decision, so it would hold up the decision-making on that portion of Karangahape Road. But again, as I mentioned before, that is an option available to the committee if you felt that the precinct should go right to the end of Karangahape Road and shouldn't be removed off that last block, then you could make that decision. There is evidence to support that decision. It would then go to Minister Bishop to make a decision as to whether it stays or is removed. And on balance, we feel it's a better process to make the decision in line with the panel's recommendations.
So my further question is, if it's not making a difference in terms of height, is the Minister going to be concerned?
I can't
don't
answer
think
to
that's a question.
Can't
for
second
John.
guess that. My concern is that wherever possible, we should be endeavouring to retain heritage, and this is a really important area, and it relates to the balance of K Road.
That's probably a debating point, so we'll just,
Hey,
yeah.
Okay, so I may well put an amendment up, Mr Chair. I don't think this is a biggie.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, I'll go to Councillor Lee first. He hasn't asked a question.
Just coming back to the K Road matter, we are in a post unitary plan world where significant deregulation and significant potential capacity was made free, essentially at the behest of the central government. So here we are, we have another round, and the idea is to further deregulate, and the stated objective is to have more people living in the central city, which I don't think anyone would disagree with. However, we're obliged to make these decisions not at the behest of a minister that may come and go. We've seen them all come and go. But what we're required to do under the law, which is the Resource Management Act. Now, even under the present legislation, and the Resource Management Act doesn't say matters of national importance, increased capacity in the Auckland city centre, increased capacity all over Auckland, housing capacity all over Auckland. That is not the law. The law requires us to, under Section 5 and Section 6 of the RMA, to make decisions within a certain framework of sustainable management of natural and physical resources. And so therefore this total focus on one aspect or an aspect as if that's going to solve problems, I think is a failure. So just remind us, in terms of the current legislation, historic heritage is a qualifying matter, is it not?
Through the Chair, that's correct. Historic heritage is a qualifying matter, and within the city centre there are many individual sites and areas, particularly in terms of Karangahape Road, that are identified as historic heritage, and the panel has supported the retention of all of the historic heritage places and the Karangahape Road historic heritage area. So there's nothing from the panel that is suggesting that historic heritage should be removed as a qualifying matter for the benefit of more intensification.
Just the other aspect, in terms of historic heritage, there are also overlays, and I assume that is to retain or conserve aesthetic coherence, which is another RMA word or concept. By breaking these things up, again, we're going down a track which is not in any way integrated or sustainable under the Act. So I just have real concerns about the total focus of certain ministers that come in and then leave about increasing capacity for really at the behest of the Property Council. And so do you not think that good planning, good town planning must adhere to as much as possible to what is required under the current legislation? You know, we've had, we're going to have new legislation, we're going to get rid of RMA, we're going to have a national policy statement. All these national policy statements are an instrument of the current legislation, not the other way around. So do you not see there is a danger of us taking a completely unbalanced approach to planning in Auckland?
That's quite a lot for this meeting, Councillor Lee, and probably some debating points. John, if you could... No. Well, John might be able to give some why we're here and what we have to...
I think the short answer is you're absolutely correct, Councillor Lee, that the National Policy Statement of Urban Development must be consistent with the RMA. It's an instrument of the RMA. It's produced under the Resource Management Act. In the hierarchy, it sits below the RMA. But that's really as far as I can probably take it. That's what we're looking to do, recommending today, we would say is in line with the National Policy Statement, which is the requirement that we have on us as council, but the NPS itself has to be consistent with the RMA.
I'll just make the point that the current minister and the previous one, previous one I would consider a friend, seem to have the assumption that a national policy statement that they promulgate overrides RMA, and of course it doesn't. It's an instrument of RMA, just like a district plan is.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Turner, and then Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you. I'll be quick because it's kind of Councillor Lee's done a much better job on what I was thinking about. So we've got 4 million square metres of floor space built in this area now, correct? How much potential is there left under the law that stands at the moment? Not, you know, how much, you know, because this is going to bring in, you said, the ability to do 16 million square metres, correct? What's the standard, what's the capacity that we can go to at the moment?
Through Chair, unfortunately, we haven't modelled the capacity of the plan as it stands. We have what Plan Change 78 will enable, and we have what's already built. With the missing piece is what the unitary plan already allows, but I think what we can say is that the Plan Change 78, as recommended by the panel, is significantly more than what the unitary plan allows, but we just don't have that. What do we currently allow? It's mainly through these increases in height in the yellow area, up to the 72.5, which is currently 50 metres or less in some areas. The removal of the overall restriction on floor space on a site-by-site basis, that floor area ratio control.
You want to just explain
those two combined? The floor area ratio control says if your site is 1,000 square metres, you may be allowed 10 times that, so 10,000. So that, with the removal of that control, there is an opportunity for far more intensity of development with the increases in height. So we know it's a big increase, we just can't quantify the difference.
So a lot of the public would say that that the expansion of the policy statement, the national policy statement on urban development, that's increased the capacity in Auckland so hugely, allowed cherry picking by the developers that has affected sort of spot places which they didn't expect to be affected. This is a huge jump in capacity between 4 million and 16 million. Have we got enough rules in here to make sure that council can control the development so that it's not ad hoc?
So all new buildings require a resource consent that can theoretically be declined, and there is a design assessment of every new building in the city centre. There are also a number of controls around ensuring that there is sufficient outlook from residential apartment buildings, that there is setbacks at certain height levels to make sure that new buildings fit into the context within the different precincts of the city centre, because as we know, Britomart is a very different place to around the town hall here, which is very different to Wynyard Quarter, which is different to the university. So there are controls in Plan Change 78 that deal with some of those subtle differences, but I think the key thing is that every new building still requires a resource consent that will still have a design assessment against the objectives of the plan.
All right, thank you. Boy, some people in Green Bay would love to have some setbacks. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair. Planning is very complex, so I just want to be very clear about what we're doing today. We are having a process to look at the IHP recommendations, which is discrete and separate to the workshops and all of the other material that we've been doing some of which some of us have some real concerns about. But in terms of what we're doing today, it's been made clear, and I just want confirmation from the officers, that we will have a second bite at the cherry when we're looking at capacity enabling for that next stage. So for those who are concerned whether or not K Road and other areas, they will have that opportunity at that next point in time. The one thing, and I'd like confirmation of that, because I think it is complex, and particularly where governments are talking about major changes to RMA and everything else, and we're all trying to pull all the strands together. But for the purpose of this council, as a creature of statute, we are responding to the IHP's recommendations today, and we either accept or reject. So I'm working from that assumption, and I will support it on the basis of that assumption. What I want to understand in the hierarchy of things, though, is on coastal inundation and flooding, you are telling us that we will need to wait for the natural hazards work, and I'm just trying to understand what trumps what, because I still have some real concerns about coastal inundation and the waterfront area and so forth. So can you speak to that for me and help me better understand where that is going to sit in the hierarchy of decision making?
Thank you. Through the chair, probably a few questions there, so apologies if I don't capture them all, respond to them all. And so in terms of the first question around, will there be another opportunity to relook at this through a potential plan change for the rest of the city? The answer is no. Decisions today effectively would lock in the city centre provisions really until there's a plan review of the unitary plan as a whole, which may be 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's scheduled to commence as early as next year. So city centre is locked in.
Can you just pause on that point so that other body of work on further intensification will not enable the concerns being expressed by the Mayor and I think Councillor Henderson, but it will come through the unitary plan process, which is a couple of years away. I just want everyone to be quite clear about this.
That really is the more appropriate process. We haven't seen the legislation yet in terms of potentially allowing the council to remove the remainder of Plan Change 78 outside the city centre. So it potentially comes down to the way that legislation is written. But our working assumption is that the city centre aspects would be dealt with for now and would have to wait to the full unitary plan review. So everything inside that red boundary there would be locked in into a full plan review. Everything outside of that, if the legislation heads the way that the council has been seeking, would be subject to another plan change, and the opportunity to submit on that would be available, but not for the city centre. That's our assumption. But the caveat is we haven't seen the legislation yet. We don't know absolutely, but that is our working assumption, that decisions today would lock in the city centre until a full plan review.
Okay, I really appreciate you making that clear in terms of all of those options that are available to us, unless we go down the track of Christchurch, which basically told, you know, they went alone, did they not, in terms of just rejecting processes. But that's for a further discussion, perhaps. But can you come to the issue of coastal inundation and flooding and where this will sit moving forward, and the work on natural hazards that is being undertaken by yourselves and others?
So, Diana has given me a bit of a qualifier to what I said previously. If there are some specific issues, in particular natural hazards, where the approach in the city centre, or we need some enhanced, strengthened provisions for natural hazards in the city centre, then a discrete issue like that could be part of a plan change that could extend into the city centre. So the broad issues of capacity, intensification, qualifying matters for the city centre, our assumption is they will be dealt with and couldn't really be revisited until full plan review. But if there is a specific matter such as tougher restrictions on hazards, then that is something through a subsequent plan change for the region could have some provisions that apply in the city centre as well. So there is that caveat that for the
Can you
close-
understand that that is actually quite frustrating in terms of understanding definitions of could or should? This gets into some really fine areas of planning that I don't want to later feel that we have in any way been misled, not by yourselves, but just because of the complexity of the legislation that we're dealing with.
I accept that, and I think a large part comes down to we haven't seen the legislation yet. I think it's a reasonable assumption, and it's probably a good suggestion that we see this as effectively locking in the bulk of the planning for the city centre, with some potential exceptions for things like hazards, where through a subsequent plan change, there may be some controls that apply across the city, including the city centre, that would come into play through a subsequent plan change.
Yes, and I'll see if we can get some information again, Councillor Fletcher, from Phil, because I remember in the early discussions on the hazards plan change, they felt that the controls through resource consent in the city centre were already strong enough to be dealing. Oh, there he is. The reason, I don't know if Phil's. Phil, the reason why we felt city centre was, my memory is that you felt resource consent and current controls such as the Quay Street seawall and things we're building are already dealing with some of those things in the city centre, which is why we progressed it.
That's right. Through the evidence that we gave in the city centre, we looked to use our experts, which we're also using through the preparation work that we're doing for the natural hazards plan change. We're using the best of our understanding at that time and setting those controls within those precincts. The open workshops that we've been doing on the natural hazards work itself has had a residential zone focus to it. And so on the topic of inundation, we've looked specifically at situations where we would be down zoning for residentially zoned land, not for other zones.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Chair, I just want to have a process question to you.
Please, yeah.
How are you going to manage if there are any amendments to reject some of what the the Independent Hearings Panel, has put forward to us? I just wanted to find that process before I ask any of the partai that I have.
Kia ora, Councillor. So I'll go to Megan if I'm not getting it right, but how I feel we should take it is, if there are amendments, we might take a break after these sets of questions. I know Councillor Walker has potential one. I think what we will do is make sure the wording is correct from an officer point of view, and then I might go through a one-by-one question. So there might be a bit of a yo-yo if there's more than one amendment. The staff can come forward, answer questions on the specifics of rejecting. Then we will debate that amendment, win or lose, and then it's slightly out of normal standing orders, but then if there's another one, I'd like to go through the same process so we get the information, so questions and debate again, and then we'll debate the substantive, if that's right, if that sounds okay.
Kia ora. So I will ask my partai then. Morena koutou team. Look, the question I have is that the first one, and that's just to confirm that there's no right of appeal under the RMA against the council's decision on the IHP recommendations.
No, there isn't. Yeah.
The process, if there is any amendments to reject, that process is that we will end up having to have the recommendation and provide alternative recommendations to the minister for him or her to make, I don't know who the minister is, for them to make the decision on any that we reject.
Yeah, that's correct.
And it has to be aligned with evidence already put before the hearings panel.
That's correct.
Can you also tell me approximately how much of our submission to the hearings panel was accepted by the hearings panel?
Most of our evidence was accepted.
Okay then. No, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Phil might just want to make his way back up front here because I do have a follow-up question from what Councillor Fletcher was talking about. But a brief comment from me, Chair, just because I won't speak later. But I mean, it's a binary question on whether to accept or reject an IHP recommendation, for which I'll be accepting it because there is no reason not to. And if there is a reason not to, it would have to be defensible, which it is not. So that's why it's a perfectly rational thing to accept these recommendations, and I will be doing that. My question, though, just following on from what Councillor Fletcher talked about with the coastal inundation and the coastal edge and the subsequent plan change work that does need to take place, it has always struck me how we've actually been able to defend a lower level of intensification in the North Shore, north of the bridge, right around the coastal edge of the North Shore, but in every other part of the Auckland region, we go, in many places, hard right up to the very edge, including in here, but we go right to the very edge. So I do support subsequent plan changes to be consistent across the region where there is evidence, and there is. I'm assuming that in some of the lower edges of the CBD, that there would be challenges with respect to inundation, which may lead us to require an inclusion with respect to a subsequent plan change to address some of that. Is that your expectation?
Yeah, as was mentioned earlier, what we do need to do is actually look at where we land as our final set of provisions for the natural hazard strengthening in the unitary plan, and consider them back against these recommended changes for the central area. We've then got choice around whether or not those differences are such that we do need to actually get back in on some of those central city provisions and amend them, or wait until we do it in a more comprehensive way through the review of the unitary plan. Yeah, there are choices there for us.
Do you have a sense at this stage as to what your recommendation would be on timing?
My sense is that the central city presents a number of different circumstances to other areas, both in terms of the existing built form, the opportunities for change that are there, and so whilst we've got approaches that we're taking for residential areas, for instance, which are differentiated and we're looking to align them, I think the approach that we take for the central area needs to be looked at very carefully before we make that type of call around whether there are further changes which need to happen to these provisions today.
Thanks, Councillor. Maybe, Phil, I remember our discussion around Ports of Auckland and Westhaven and things. Is it part of the reason it wouldn't be included in the hazards plan change because of, and why it's different in residential, is due to the height of the current, I think it's 100 years the ports believe they are safe, and Quay Street, but also the level of investment we'd be likely to do in somewhere like the city centre rather than every other suburb in the city. There's like a bit of I think Paul Kleinak might have commented on this too.
Yeah, and so questions around reasonable use, the types of intensity which are provided in the city centre and how that in turn provides more options for how land can be used. They're all factors that differentiate it from other parts of the region.
Thank you. Looks like we have, Councillor Watson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And not quite directly related to the matter of hand, but I don't know if you'll be able to help me or not. So we're dealing with the recommendations today to do with increase in density and height and all the rest of it. We did have reference in one of the many workshops to do with that report that came out in terms of life in medium density housing, and there are a couple of pockets of medium density in this zone, I think, up around Hopeland Street. I'm not sure. I mean, medium density can go up to 6 stories, so I think it is. But irrespective, I imagine this applies to apartments as well, where we had our own research you know, pointed to a number of concerns in respect of the, you know, the average size of homes, inadequate storage, lounges smaller than best practice, etc., etc. Where is that? Where and when is that work going to get picked up? Because obviously, as we make these decisions, we're increasing the stock of this higher intensity housing, and our own report shows that there are some pretty serious reservations with the way that's evolving on the ground, and you know, it's Aucklanders who are going to live in this accommodation. So just a general question, not strictly apropos today, but really it is important by association.
Thank you. Through the chair, as you may recall, and it relates to the discussion around natural hazards, one of the limitations on what Plan Change 78 could do is that it can't have any new restrictions. It has to be enabling more. And that was that section 80E of the RMA that you might have heard about. We can't introduce anything new. So there's nothing in Plan Change 78 that actually introduces new requirements around indoor living, size of indoor living areas, those other factors that you mentioned, Councillor Watson. So there's nothing in Plan Change 78, and there couldn't be, it wasn't allowed. It was a plan change that was required to be allowing more development, not addressing any existing issues. So those matters would have to be addressed through a subsequent plan change. As we've talked about, that subsequent plan change for the rest of the region probably couldn't deal with the city centre. I think one of the key things we need to bear in mind for those sort of controls that you're talking about is that there are strong signals from government about changes to the RMA to reduce the ability of councils to deal with them. So we have, it's a sort of moving target. We have to watch that space as well. But certainly for the rest of the region, for medium density through the potential replacement plan change for the rest of 78, those improving the overall quality of development will be a factor of, will be something that we could apply in the new plan change. It just wouldn't be able to apply to the city centre. That would have to be dealt with at a later date. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. I think we have got there on the questions. I don't think there are many opportunities for, I don't think there are many rejections coming, but there is at least one amendment. But please, if you have another amendment, let's just break for 10 minutes and we'll just make sure that anything shaking out is appropriate or I guess legal, and then we'll have some questions on them. But if that's cool, if you could bring your amendment to myself, Megan and Phoebe, and we will work to put that forward, and please have a seconder for that as well. Cool. So staff will just let you step back for 10 minutes.